I'm Olga from Minerva, and this video is a sew-along for the McCall's 8161 pattern. This is the pattern right here that we are going to be making today. We are going to be making view D, which isn't on the front, but is on the back here, and it's a very, very cute puff sleeve kind of top. This pattern already includes seam allowance, which is always good to know. I will obviously be linking everything that we use today just so you can easily buy it as a kit. Then we are going to be using some really cute fabric, obviously. I have here this really pretty Rose and Hubble cotton poplin, and this is really nice and light. It's lovely for the summer. Yeah, it's lovely for summer dresses and tops, and honestly anything you want to sew with this, because it's really easy to work with, holds its shape really nicely. It is just a really easy fabric to work with. So yeah, this is pale blue, the color I'm using here, but there's obviously a variety if you want to go with something else for yours specifically, but if you want to make the exact same one that I'm making, we're using pale blue today. As far as notions and other things that you will be needing for this project, we have some Gutermann polyester thread. This is color 965, so that's the one that matches this blue fabric. Polyester thread is really good to work with sewing machines because it's a lot stronger than cotton thread, and so it has more resistance, it doesn't break as easily, and it all around has a lot more durability. So that's why we use polyester thread. Other things we're going to be needing: some interfacing. Here we have the Vliezline interfacing in white. This is their soft and light iron-on interfacing. We'll only be needing the interfacing for a couple of smaller pieces, so you don't really need that much. You can buy this by the meter, but it's easier to get a little packet, so you have about 90 by 50 centimeters, and then you can use this for a variety of projects. And last but not least, we are going to be using some hemline hooks and eyes. This little box has 14 sets of small, they're made out of nickel, and these are the silver, so you have different finishes if you choose to go with a different finish. But yes, that is everything that we will be needing to start our project. You don't need any special sewing machine needles for this because obviously cotton is really easy to sew. You can sew it with pretty much anything. Your regular sewing machine needle will be fine. So without further ado, let's get started with the actual project, the exciting part.
Our first step, as always, is to cut out our pattern pieces. Make sure to check your measurements and see what size they translate into, and find the cutting lines you need. This pattern includes 3 different front pieces depending on your cup sizes, so keep that in mind when you select your front piece. If you're unsure what your cup size is, the pattern instructions do include a handy guide. So, to make view D in my size, I needed pattern pieces 1, 4 through to 6, 9, and 11. Once all our pattern pieces have been cut out, we can move on to cut our fabric. For the best results, I like to fold my fabric lengthwise with right sides together so the selvages meet. You can then place the paper pattern pieces in the correct grain line, which will be the way the arrow in the pattern is pointing. If you are unsure of how to do this, refer to the pattern instructions cutting layouts. These can be very helpful to show you which way to place your pattern pieces, but do be mindful of fabric wasting. You can often get away with placing the pieces more close together than indicated. When you find a layout you are happy with, pin those pieces in place and cut out your fabric. Now that all those pieces have been cut out, we need to transfer the pattern markings onto our fabric. There are different methods of doing things, but my personal preference is an erasable fabric marker and carbon paper. Don't forget to cut your notches on the fabric, but to stay inside the seam allowance. Next, cut out the interfacing pieces for pattern pieces 5 and 6, just like you would cut out fabric. Although the instructions list this as step 6, I prefer to fuse the interfacing before I get started on sewing, so I'll be doing that now. Place the interfacing on its respective fabric piece with wrong sides together. The wrong side of the interfacing should be slightly textured and shiny. Then fuse the interfacing using your iron on a medium to low setting for about 8 seconds. We can now move on to the actual sewing. We will start by pinning the darts in the front piece. Then sew the darts and press them down. If you are making the C and D cup sizes, you may trim the darts before pressing. I like pressing the darts on both sides, but that's optional. Next, we can repeat those steps for the darts in the back pieces and press them toward the center. After that, we are going to pin the back sections together at the center back with right sides together, leaving the area above the large circle open. Make sure to match the notches. Then we can go ahead and stitch this seam. Now we can trim the seam allowance with our pinking shears and iron the seam open. You may also use a serger, a zigzag stitch, or any other method of finishing these seams that you may choose. The following step is to pin the back and front pieces together at the shoulders and sides with right sides together and making sure to match the notches. Then we will stitch those seams in place. Again, trim the seam allowance with pinking shears and press those seams open. Moving on to the facing, we will pin the back neck facing sections to the front neck facing at the shoulder seams with right sides together, making sure to match the notches. We can then stitch these seams together and finish them using our preferred method. Lastly, we will also finish the unnotched bottom edge of the facing. In order to attach the facing to the top, we can start by pinning them together with right sides together, making sure to match our seams and notches. Then we can stitch those together on the neck and back opening edges. After stitching, trim the seam allowance with pinking shears and iron the seams so the facing lays flat. Next, we are going to turn in 6 mm on the raw edges of the seam allowances of the back opening edges and baste that in place. I took the time to press that seam allowance in the previous step to make this one easier. Then we can go ahead and top stitch the back opening edges through all the thicknesses, pivoting across the seam below the large circle. Don't forget to remove those basting stitches when you're done. Finally, tack the facing down at the seams with a few hand stitches. We can then move on to the sleeves. First, we are going to ease stitch the upper edge of the upper sleeves between those notches. This means we will use large sewing machine stitches so we can later pull the thread ends to adjust the fit. Next, we will stitch the sleeve seams, making sure we match those notches. Then, press those seams open after trimming the seam allowance with your pinking shears. Now, we'll state stitch the lower sleeve along the stitching line in the small opening. Then, to hem the lower edge of the lower sleeve, we will start by stitching around 1.3 centimeters from the raw edge. After that, we will turn in and press that edge alongside the stitching. Next, we will trim that edge very close to the stitching. Finally, we can turn the edge in again along the trimmed edge and pin that in place as we go. Stitch it in place and optionally press to make the seam nice and flat. Now we can pin the lower sleeve to the upper sleeve with right sides together, matching the square to the sleeve seam and the notches. You may clip the lower sleeve if necessary. Then we can go ahead and stitch that, and then stitch again 6 mm away in the seam allowance. After that, we are going to trim the seam allowance close to the stitching using our pinking shears. Lastly, we can press the seam toward the sleeve. We can now move on to pinning the sleeve to the armhole with right sides together, taking care to match seams, notches, and place the large circle at the shoulder seam. Here is when we need to adjust the ease of the upper sleeve to our liking. Then we can stitch that in place and then stitch again 6 millimeters away in the seam allowance. Next, we will trim that close to the stitching with our pinking shears. Finally, we can press the seam allowances toward the sleeve. After attaching the sleeves, we can move on to our finishing touches. We can start by trimming the lower edge of the top with our pinking shears. Then, turn up the hem and pin it in place. You may sew this by hand, but I went ahead and stitched it in the sewing machine. Last but not least, we can sew the hook and eye to the back opening edges with hand stitches.
So there we have our finished garment. I hope you enjoyed sewing along with me. I hope you enjoyed making this top. I think it is adorable. It's just so cute. I hope you enjoyed making that with me. I hope you had fun. I hope you learned something maybe, or brushed up on some techniques that you haven't used in a while maybe. I don't know. I hope you had fun most of all. That's really the most important part of this, is that you're enjoying your sewing, is that you're making things that you love and that you love to wear, and that you are having fun while doing it. So if you want, you can also join our Minerva sewing community. That's absolutely free. You can just create an account and you can post your pictures, you can post little videos of yourself of what you've made. Definitely share with us what you make, and especially if you made this pattern specifically and you sew along with me, I would so love to see that. It would be so exciting to see what you make and how it comes out, and especially if you use different fabrics or anything different than from what I did, that would be really cool for me to see. If you have any questions or anything that you want to say, you can leave that in the comments. We would get back to you as soon as we possibly can and try to help as much as we possibly can as well. But yes, I think that's everything for this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it and that you had fun. And if you haven't got your materials just yet, you can save this video so you can watch it later when you do get your materials and we can sew along together. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you for being a part of our community. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!